This is Arab Talk on KPOO 89.5 FM in San Francisco. This is Arab Talk with Jess and Jamal. I'm Jess Nam.
And this is Jamal Dejani. Happy
Well,
New Year.
yes, Happy New Year, Jamal, and Happy New Year to our listeners and to our viewers all over the world from the Bay Area and beyond. Unfortunately, we're beginning the new year with some very dramatic and potentially significant difficulties for the remainder of this year already. And I'm not even talking about the pandemic. In less than 24 hours, the United States has been in the throes of an armed coup d'etat where thousands of white supremacists, Trump supporters, engaged in treasonous and seditious behavior by storming the U.S. Capitol. 4 people were killed. Was unlike anything this country has ever seen, and since 1812, actually, Jamal, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But if our listeners and viewers haven't been listening to us for this last number of years talking about how white domestic terrorists, white supremacy domestic terrorists are the biggest threat to this country, yesterday was kind of proof of that. And I think we have an eyewitness account.
That's right, Jess. Let's first listen to our reporter in Washington, D.C. We spoke to him earlier, Phil Pasquini, who has been in Washington. He reported to us many times from Washington, D.C., and he's going to talk about his experience, what he saw on the ground, and so we'll pick it up afterwards. Joining us from Washington, D.C., Arab Talk extraordinaire reporter Phil Pasquini. Phil, let me begin by wishing you and your family a better 2021. I mean...
and the same to you and your family.
This is the start of 2021 of what we saw yesterday. I don't know if I remain hopeful, Phil. I mean, a mob, that's all that I can describe it with, you know,
right.
Or maybe terrorist mob supporting President Donald Trump surged past barriers. You're in Washington, D.C., in the U.S. Capitol, used chemical irritants against police and forced lawmakers to flee for their safety. What have you witnessed, and what's the mood now the day after?
Well, I wasn't able to get up to the Capitol yesterday. We got as far as Black Lives Matter Plaza, which they knew also to be a flashpoint, and it was closed, although there were some BLM protesters between the police line. Well, they were sandwiched between 2 police lines at BLM, and the Trumpers with their requisite flags on flag staffs and wrapped around their bodies came by. There was a couple of ugly incidences of people screaming at one another, calling each other names and so forth as they walked by. Most of them, I think, went there looking to cause a disturbance, but since it was shut down, there wasn't much action. There were no international news crews or any news crews that I saw at all. At least the time that we were there. We walked then towards Freedom Plaza, where last month we covered the Million MAGA March. There were a lot of people milling around, going back and forth. Of course, they have no love for the press or the media. We didn't feel particularly welcomed. But then again, nobody is wearing masks, and they're all screaming and yelling. So we turned around and came back to where we stay. And that's when all the action started at the Capitol. And I was disappointed and thoroughly disgusted with what I saw, as I know many people did. They are insurrectionists, they are terrorists, and they are street thugs. And there's no other way to put it. I think I was particularly incensed and disappointed in the Capitol Police, who I've seen come down very hard on peaceful demonstrators, virtually overwhelmed and unreactive for the most part, when that was not the case at any of the BLM demonstrations that were so threatening to everyone at that time. It was crazy. The mayor called for a shelter-in-place order and a curfew at about 9 p.m. last night. The streets were completely void. There were no cars only a few homeless people wandering around occasionally. And until about 7 this morning, the streets were empty. It just went out a while ago. There are very few people walking outside. Mostly everybody is sheltering in place, staying away from any action whatsoever. The mood overall is pretty bad.
Now, we've been talking about Donald Trump for the past 4 years, and at every juncture we've been saying, oh no, he's not going to do that. That's the worst thing that could happen. And then something else would happen. And then, everyone has been saying, he's not going to leave peacefully, including, by the way, I've been watching his niece, various interviews shedding,
Mary,
she's a psychologist shedding light on his kind of status of mind, and said, no, this guy's never going to give up. And we've seen his supporters before in Washington, D.C. and other places and how they react. And I'm shocked because you said you're disappointed with the Capitol Police. I'm really shocked that there was no preparation of whatsoever, having kind of known what's going to happen, having seen him on TV egging them on and telling them to march onto the Capitol. That you've been in and out of the hallways of Congress. I've been there. I've spent more than 3 years in Washington, D.C. It seems well protected. And this is the crazy thing. And I was thinking about it. We spend $1 trillion protecting the United States from enemies outside. This is our over $700 billion, our military budget, close to $1 trillion. And then a mob of people were able to penetrate the U.S. Congress.
Right.
Isn't this crazy? I was looking at them. They all looked like they're from Duck Dynasty or I don't know what, but
it's true.
They were able to almost hold U.S. senators and congressmen and congresswomen hostage. And thank God no one was hurt as far as that, but 4 people, were killed.
Right.
What do you say about this?
Well, they practice for these scenarios all the time, and they have the manpower. Where it was, I have no idea. It took several hours to get enough people there to actually control the crowd. Their emphasis wasn't so much initially on moving people. They seemed to just kind of cave in and backed into the building, and then they penetrated the building. The building space should be so sterile that if you come through the door, you would be shot to protect the space. They didn't do any of that. They for whatever reason, they were overwhelmed, unprepared. It wasn't until late last night at around, I'd say between 10 and 11, that they actually brought in National Guard troops that set up a perimeter. They corralled the people that were still milling around in the street after the curfew. And I heard, supposedly, they were going to arrest everybody that was there. They gave a disbursement order and nobody left. This morning I got up and no one was arrested. 50 people were arrested out of a crowd estimated to be in the thousands. You could argue whether it was 5,000 or 10,000. They've virtually taken over the city by themselves. When you see them walking around, they're very arrogant and aloof and above things. The best part about it is, outside of these flashpoints, they don't know where they are in the city. They walk around looking at cell phones, trying to figure out where they are, but they know where to go ultimately. And it's frightening to me because the security that you're talking about is good for one-on-one. You got one officer and you have 5 people and he'll intimidate them and they'll turn around and go back or take whatever orders are given. They're not prepared. They were not prepared to deal with a group of hostile people who had nefarious intent. They didn't go there to address Congress. They didn't go there to address their grievances. And they think they're perfectly within their right because of the First Amendment and the Constitution. But it doesn't say in the Constitution that you can assemble or you can demonstrate or bring your grievances to the government in a violent manner. It's for peaceful demonstration and dissent.
Well, some of
And
them
this
were
should have
threatening the
been
police officers. They were saying to
right.
them, "We're going to come back next with firearms."
Right. And when I covered the Million MAGA March, they about 1,000 of them broke away from the main group and came running up the street. And I went down to see what was going on, and they stormed a street barricade where there were about 5 cops, and they held them off for a few minutes, and they brought more people in on bikes. And when they came in, they were cheering and yelling, and they've got their flags with the blue stripe on it for the blue line, and yelling, "We love the police." It was nothing but propaganda. And I knew that, and they knew that. And they were ready to go through that checkpoint, but they only stopped because they brought about 70 people in with bikes very quickly and put it down. So they, hit a point of resistance. They turned around and they went back to the main group. We're not talking about street fighters who come up and mug you. We're talking about 50 guys who jump on you. What chance do you have at that point? You got the Proud Boys and the Women for Trump and the Take Back the Election and all these extremist groups with QAnon and the rest of them. They are nothing more, in my mind, and I've seen them in action, street thugs and not good Americans. I don't care what their intent was. They were interviewing a kid from New Jersey last night who was about 20, talking about he came there to have his voice heard. This is not how you have your voice heard. You can vote. You can write letters. You can street protest and do what other people who have been vilified because they objected to Amy Coney Barrett's process to get on the Supreme Court, and the other street demonstrations that I've seen by so-called left-wing radicals who are peaceful, who've brought their things forward, made their points made, and then left. Not a bunch of thugs who invade a building, the Capitol of the United States. How does this play out, as you know? And you know what the Middle Eastern perspective is and many other things. How does this play out about how democracy works in America? It's an embarrassment. It's a total sham. And Trump is the person who is doing this, bar none. And he should be held accountable. Someone's talking now about the 25th Amendment. It should be evoked immediately. He is a criminal. This is a criminal act. He egged everybody on, and then he went back in and hid in the White House. That's the kind of person that he is. Get everybody else to do his dirty work for him.
So now we are
disgusting.
Less than 2 weeks away from the inauguration.
Right.
And then I've actually stayed up very late last night watching Congress just to make sure that the process is going to go through. And now it has gone through. And despite all the delays, Biden is going to be the next president of the United States. But as you've said, some people are talking about the 25th Amendment. We have 2 weeks. What's the mood like? I mean, in Washington, D.C.? Are we going to expect more demonstrations? Is the Secret Service going to drag Trump out? Is he going to drag us into a war with Iran during those last 2 weeks? 2 weeks are 2 weeks.
Right. No, it's a very dangerous time. We talked about this on more than one occasion here. The most dangerous time of the Trump presidency was going to be if he lost the election, and the last few days, weeks, months, whatever, that led up to his realization, living in his Walter Mitty world, having to confront the fact that he is not going to be the president. And I agree with you. There's things out there now about Israeli agents causing, the death of Americans in order to prompt the U.S. to become involved in a war with Iran, other virtual conspiracy ideologies about how this is going to play out. We have a war at home right now, and we have a serious condition and situation that we need to address. I think I'm all for invoking the 25th Amendment and getting him out of there and turning this country back around in the right direction. It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to play out on January 21st, the day after Biden has been the president for half a day. We're not going to see peace suddenly descend on the nation and all these issues go away. The most dangerous thing about Donald Trump, we talked about this 4 years ago when he was elected, was, in my opinion at any rate, and I know you agree, was simply the fact that he was going to set a narrative that was going to normalize bad behavior and stupidity and more conspiracy theories. Go back to the birther issue as one. and then move forward from that. Look what we have. And as you said, it's just one thing after the other. You probably saw the statement he made yesterday about we want peace and this has to stop and we love you. It was the most emaciated, difficult thing to look at because it was so poorly constructed and such ignorant, stupid statement of all. Now, then he says after that, he's going to go for peaceful transfer of power. Now today he's back to he's going to fight to the end. He's a liar. He needs to be taken out of there as quickly as possible and let Pence run the show if he's capable of it. He finally stood up to him, as a few others have. But the whole thing is completely a joke at this point. Him being president. It's been a joke for 4 years. It's getting worse. It's now a serious joke. People are dying for what? Who knows?
Now you work alongside a lot of foreign reporters, and of course you yourself reported from overseas. We spoke about this in the past, but I don't know what you're hearing now about the image of the United States, about democracy, the standing. We go around lecturing people, talking about the Arab Spring. This is what people should do and they should not do. And then yesterday, and a country you're very familiar with, Turkey, issued a warning to its citizens to be careful when they are in Washington, D.C. This is the type of warnings I receive when I travel overseas. And you receive from the State Department, stay away from Tahrir Square, don't go here, don't go there. But because Turkey issued a warning to its citizens to stay away from Washington, D.C. What do you say to this?
Well, I got an email this morning from a Turkish friend in Anatolia who said, I can't believe that this would happen in America. I thought America was a safe place to be. I have friends in Italy who have communicated their disgust and surprise, which is not surprising to me, by the way. This is what we've all anticipated. Anybody that's known Donald Trump or watched his career unfold and the way he's behaved since he was elected, this is just par for what it is. When you see people walking around the streets wrapped in Trump flags and American flags, espousing their patriotism, who know nothing about patriotism. I mean, our founding fathers did say if the government was corrupt, had to rise up and straighten it out. I don't disagree with that. But you don't rise up for non-issues to destroy the very democracy that causes you to be complacent to begin with. I see these guys driving around in Ford F-150 pickup trucks that are all outfitted, jacked up off the ground. They spent thousands of dollars. How is that going to proceed forward? When you don't have all of those things that you need. People have become too complacent and lost the sense of direction and a sense of nationalism, not in a nationalist sense, but aren't we all Americans? On 9/11, we all pulled together. Now, look how fragmented we are because of one person, because of their policy and the implementers. There was a photograph on the morning program of the senators who stand behind him and are still questioning this. They're fomenting more dissent. They're fomenting more problems. These people that are here that caused this problem yesterday were not arrested. They're out on the streets today demonstrating once again, marching around, trying to intimidate people as they walk down the street. Washingtonians are filled up with it. I don't blame them. They're sick and tired of all of this stuff. And as it gets worse, it's only going, I think, to get worse yet. I don't see any light at the end of the tunnel at the moment. Unless these people are held accountable and for their actions, they feel entitled to come to Washington. Or I saw there was a big violent demonstration in Sacramento yesterday and other places around the country in support of Trump's stolen election. So,
well, we have 2 more weeks. Hopefully no special surprises like this one, and the country can pull together and start a fresh leaf starting January 20th of this year. And we will be talking soon. Phil, stay safe. Keep us posted. And
I shall.
Thank you again.
Yeah, be safe. I'll talk to you soon.
That's the voice of Phil Pasquini, Arab Talk correspondent, live from the middle of the armed coup d'etat in Washington, D.C. yesterday, Jamal. Quite a frightening report.
Well, just let's explain, because you're using a very big word, coup d'etat, which we don't hear about here. There are, watching the news, many interpretations to what happened. The news report starting by saying these are Trump supporters.
Or protesters.
Demonstrators, protesters,
Yeah.
demonstrators. And then you're saying it's a coup d'etat. I call them terrorists. I call them anarchists, whatever you want to call them. But definitely they are not demonstrators. And then you're kind of like elevating this to say that we had an attempted coup d'etat. Why do you think it is a coup d'etat?
Well, the reason I think it's a coup d'etat, Jamal, is because this was an attempt to disrupt and potentially overthrow the main center, well, arguably one of three major centers of power in the United States government. You have the executive branch, which is, the presidency and all of its support. Then you have the legislative branch, which is the Senate and the House. And then you have you have the branch, of justice, the legal branch. This was the legislative is the second one, and then the one that's associated with all the courts, the judicial arm of power. And what we saw yesterday, Jamal, was armed insurrectionists attempting to thwart the will of the people using physical force and threats of grave bodily injury. And in some case, Jamal, you could actually say that for a period of time, they essentially took over the legislative branch of the U.S. government. In my humble opinion, that's an attempted coup d'etat. Were they successful? No, they were not. But at the same time, there were so many things that went wrong yesterday, not the least of which is that you had the President of the United States inciting violence, basically throwing the match on the gasoline of this insurrection. And then you had the Capitol Police, Jamal, which was unbelievable, basically being overwhelmed. And there's some video, I know you saw it, of literally and figuratively opening up the barricades and the doors and letting these thousands of people in. So my question to you is, if these were brown and black people or Muslims who were descending on Washington, D.C. at this time with this kind of intent, what do you think the outcome would have been?
Totally different. And we saw that with the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, which were mostly peaceful. We have actually pictures of the Capitol Police in full gear surrounding the U.S. Capitol, preventing people from coming to the steps of the U.S. Capitol.
That's right.
I have a different take here, and this is an important take. I mean, you're absolutely right about everything you said. But my take is a little bit different, and it's actually a scary take, and I think it will change the way that the United States is going to be approaching security, just like what happened after 9/11.
Yep.
Just like what happened, you remember the days we lament, you and I are old enough, when we used to greet our friends and visitors, and I used to pick up my mom from the door of the airplane when she used to come and visit us. We used to walk all the way there. That's done, gone. Now, every time there is something that happens, every time something happens, like the crazy guy that wanted to had a bomb in his shoe, and then he started taking your shoes, right? They start making you take off your shoes.
Right.
Well, this is going to change. I lived over 3 years in Washington, D.C., and I've been in and out Capitol Hill, all the different buildings, the main U.S. Capitol building and the adjunct buildings, and walk through the tunnels that connect these buildings together, ate at the cafeterias where the congressmen and their staff eat. So I'm very familiar. At every entryway where you enter, you're right, there is just the regular security go through a metal detector, and they're not prepared to face crowds.
That's right.
Now, this is going to change Trust me, this is going to change. This kind of access, just also the days where people used to come closer to the White House and then they push the fence further away so they can't come near the White House. This is going to change. But here is the caveat. The United States, and this is where I'm angry, and it actually reminds me, and you can make, why is he making that comparison? Because, I've covered the Arab Spring, and I was in Syria, and I was in Libya, and I was in Tunisia, and whatever, and I've seen kind of like what crowds can do, and how governments reacted, and this is something we'll talk about it in a second. Yes, the United States spends minimum of $700 billion.
That's right, Jamal.
To $1 trillion.
That's right.
Trying to protect us or protect basically the White House, the seat of the government, protect Washington, D.C. Spend $1 trillion, trying to protect the borders of the United States. And here you have a bunch of rednecks, hillbillies. They look like they're from the Ducks Dynasty show. Were able to make it all the way to the speakers of the House office, all the way to the U.S. Congress main meeting room under the dome.
Right.
And so that whole security you had under that Congress, because that's a joint session.
Correct.
You had all the 400, what do we have, 427 congressmen and congresswomen today?
438, I think, 37.
438 plus 100 senators,
right?
Plus the vice president of the United States,
and they breached
all their staff, etc. They were held hostage by this mob, But Jamal, that whole security that we have in place, these people were able within 30 minutes to be inside the U.S. Capitol.
I think you're
right. That's what I'm talking about. They have now to revisit this whole security apparatus that was a colossal failure on their part.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Jamal, but I want to add insult to injury to what you're saying. Not only was it a colossal failure on the part of the security of the police force there, what's even more disturbing is that this whole event was planned online in full view of all of our security apparatuses in front of the FBI, in front of the CIA, in front of national security, in front of police. This was organized on social media. It was propagated on social media.
You talk about it for days, Jess. You know that.
Jamal, they were planning on it for 2 weeks, and the person that was behind the effort to get this off the ground was the President of the United States, who said about a month ago, you just wait till January 7th because something big is going to happen. And then he and Rudy Giuliani basically say, you will never change things through weakness. That's basically what the president said yesterday as they were meeting on their way to march to the Capitol. So
now I have to give you some kudos here, Jess. You have been since day one saying that Donald Trump is not going to leave peacefully.
He's not.
We were making jokes. I was like asking, what do you think? Is he going to get dragged out from the White House by the Secret Service? And said, yeah, he's not going to be leaving peacefully. And this is just the latest illustration of everything, denying that he lost, making up lies about irregularities with the electoral system, challenging the electoral system with his clowns, and I call them clowns in Congress, starting with Cruz and company. And then this is the last scene, basically when they asked him, like, even when these people were attacking the U.S. Capitol, and he was saying, go away peacefully, but I know you're angry and why you're angry. We got basically
the election
cheated.
Was stolen, right?
It's election. He keeps repeating the same lies time and time and again and egging, because you've watched these people, right? They're not that smart. Have you seen some of the interviews with this guy who was sitting behind Nancy Pelosi's desk and bragging about leaving her a note and who stole a letter? Have you listened to these guys? You see his supporters, they're a bunch of kooks. Yes.
Well, here's the problem.
They. I don't know if they have the any education beyond sixth grade. To tell you the truth,
I don't. I think that it's actually you're onto something that's really important, Jamal. But here's the thing that's even more frightening. There were lots of people there who were very intelligent. You had Josh Hawley, who's a freshman senator, who raised his hand.
Well, that's a different story. You're talking about those puppets in Congress.
Yeah, but
and
these are people.
About Cruz, and I talk about Rubio, and I talk about Hawley.
They also incited. Here's another thing. It looks like there was a West Virginia legislature who was also, doing a selfie video of himself storming the Capitol also. I think we have to be careful to say that it's just ignorance, Jamal, because this is way beyond ignorance.
Well, a lot of these people, just the ones that I saw going there, screaming, we want our rights, we want to, it's the same kind of message. We want to we want to get our country, make America great again. These are the low levels. Those are the ones that basically people in the Senate, like Senator Cruz and Rubio and others,
Hawley.
They weaponize. They play on their emotions and they play on their ignorance. I would say that's why I said it's kind of like a show. I thought like this is like they came from Duck Dynasty or some crazy show like this. But you have these senators, a lot of them went to law schools, they went to Yale, and very educated, and they're doing the same thing. I mean, these are the same ones who were very critical of Donald Trump, and then later on joined his ranks because they knew that he was weaponizing these people, playing on their emotions. A bunch of white supremacists, basically, were very bitter to see a black president in the White House for 8 years, and they feel that they've been cheated in general. And Donald Trump, we know he's the founder of this whole birther movement, and these guys, I hold them just as much as responsible as Donald Trump.
But of course, Jamal, they're all culpable, and it's the birther movement. But I think the main theme here is white grievance. That
white supremacists, you're absolutely right. And
it's white grievance.
Quick reference to their attire, the flags they were flying, the Confederate flag, the Israeli flag,
right,
the Nazi flag.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on that, Jamal, because for me, the most stunning pictures, and this goes back to some other news that we need to cover, maybe not today, but later on. You saw the Israeli flag, you saw the Confederate flag. And,
the variation of the Nazi flag.
And the variation of the Nazi flag.
Light blue, and took the swastika, but it was actually a Nazi flag. I have pictures of these three flags that they were carrying.
And then you have Ivanka Trump tweeting, even though she took this down afterwards, tweeting that these were patriots.
Yeah, sure.
And then last week, because of COVID and all the other things were happening, you had probably the biggest spy in the history of the United States being released by Donald Trump and his administration, Jonathan Pollard, back as he's an American citizen, releasing him to the Israelis. Jonathan Pollard is responsible for more damage to the U.S. intelligence community than any other spy in the history of this country, was released. And he was welcomed as a hero in Israel. So Israel's heroes are America's treasonous supporters and treasonous and seditious people. That's why the Israeli flag was flying there, Jamal. That's why the Confederate flag was flying there. That's why this is really white supremacy domestic violence. They haven't gotten over white supremacy. They haven't gotten over the Civil War. We see this stain on U.S. psyche, on the U.S. mentality, coming back to rear its ugly head. It hasn't been put down. And here's my prediction. I mean, we're going to be making predictions over the next 2 weeks. Donald Trump and this whole thing, I know I said it's not going to go away. He's not going to go away easily, but I have even a worse prediction. This whole thing is going to continue on for months, if not years. In fact, today, Jamal, breaking news, many state capitals, you had the same people who breached the U.S. Capitol were going to state capitals today and attempting to do similar things, attempting to breach state capitol buildings, many of which had to go on lockdown and close because of the information that they may be stormed, very much like the U.S. Capitol. People need to really wake up of the danger that Donald Trump and white supremacy are posing to this country. He is a clear and present danger to this country and to democracy. And people are kind of asleep.
The 25th Amendment, just,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how serious.
It's not serious. It's not serious.
You don't think that's going to happen?
No.
I mean, a lot could happen in the next 2 weeks, right? So, and we've said before, time and again, that the last 50 or 100 days of Donald Trump will be the most dangerous days, and we've seen that. He's like in a rush, like pardoning his friends, egging his supporters to storm the Capitol, and doing all kinds of crazy things.
Yeah, and I think, unfortunately, brother, the last 10 days, 13 days, are going to be very difficult. You had a couple of people resign today saying they couldn't put up with it. Mick Mulvaney, OMB, Elaine Chao, wife of Mitch McConnell, as well as one of the secretaries. I think she's the transportation secretary. I'm not sure which one. But it's such a joke. You supported this demagogue for 4 years. You were codependent with him. You were facilitating his attack on democracy and his attempt to undermine and disenfranchise 80 million people who voted for Joe Biden. And now with 3 days left, 10 days left, whatever, you're going to resign from the president. You're going to resign your position from the Trump administration. It's insulting. It's insulting beyond belief. And even the senators who chose at the last minute to withdraw their crazy claims to interfere with the kind of counting of the electoral votes yesterday, the 3 or 4 senators who withdrew it, your blood is still on your hands. I mean,
they only did it because they saw what happened.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's too late.
I mean, in a way, what happened kind of like saved us a little bit from a very prolonged debate that they were planning to challenge every single, basically, swing state vote.
Right.
And they just ended up doing it with Arizona and Pennsylvania, and then these other senators said, "We'll pass. We won't have these debates." I mean, that's but just to see, like, again, I go back to Ted Cruz and others. These guys need to be voted out. They know better. Ted Cruz is highly educated. He's, I think he studied, his specialty was constitutional law, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
But, and to just like continue with the charade and lies is just beyond pale.
Well, here's the thing, Jamal, that I want to get your input on. I mean, I consider this one of the most catastrophic, embarrassing, sad, disturbing moments in U.S. history, okay? And here we have the United States that is, and I'm putting this in air quotes now, supposed to be the beacon of democracy and decency throughout the world. We thuggishly tell other countries how to do democracy and what they should do. We've had the United States lecturing Arab countries for decades and lecturing other countries in Central and South America on how to do democracy. What do you think people in the Arab world and in North Africa and in Africa took from the images that they saw last night at the U.S. Capitol?
We are the laughing stock, Jess. I mean, in short. And we're coming across as hypocrites. And we talked about this before. I just can't listen or hear any U.S. politician or pundit lecturing the rest of the world about democracy and about peaceful transition. And then, by the way, all these people say, "Oh, we're not a third world country." Well, guess what?
Yes, we are.
It's an insult to say we're not a third world country and we're not a banana republic. Well, guess what? That's an insult to bananas and to republics when you say that. I mean, they just kind of like, again, the media in general, they're so ignorant. We just have this sense of entitlement that we keep going after time and time again, that we're something special. And God forbid that we're not going to see this violence. It doesn't happen here. And I mentioned about the security failure, and I go back to what I've seen like in Syria. In Syria, they put all their energy on a police state, creating a police state, and ignore their borders.
Right.
And that's why ISIS managed to penetrate through that porous border from Iraq and Turkey, and then make their way all the way almost to Damascus. And with us here, we put all our energy in meddling in other countries' affairs and putting naval fleets all over the world and sending billions of dollars worth of equipment and military gear to countries like Saudi Arabia and Israel and others. And then while we left, our capital unprotected. So all these things have to be re-examined. But then, again, just this whole idea, just think about what Donald Trump and Pence, who were they lecturing recently? Venezuela, right? That's their kind of like their focus.
And Cuba.
Was on Venezuela.
And Cuba.
Or there wasn't a peaceful transition. That, the demonstrators, look what's going on in Hong Kong. And then, and following with this, of course, is our media. When we're having similar, if not worse, things happening right here in the United States. So, this whole idea that we are the beacon of democracy and stability, this has been shattered.
I think that's exactly right, Jamal. And I think that this is why I said at the top of the show, this is going to have long-lasting effects, not only domestically for us for many months, if not years, but this is going to have a lasting effect on U.S. foreign policy. This, not only are we a laughingstock, but how can Western allies take us seriously and negotiate with us while Trump is doing the dirty work for, I think, Vladimir Putin? I mean, I think what happened yesterday made Vladimir Putin and the Russians, they were probably drinking vodka and partying all night, because this is part of the Russian disinformation program on how to destabilize the United States. Their dream came true. And what are our allies thinking right now in terms of, the stability of this country, number one, and then number two, how much they can rely on the United States for support? I think this is going to be a pretty catastrophic blow for the attempt to have democratic rule in other parts of the world. And more importantly, and I wonder what you think about this, it will embolden other dictators, other demagogues, other people to kind of do similar things. And we won't have the political or moral capital to be able to lecture anybody. But, look at our best friends now. We released Jonathan Pollard to the Israelis, who did more damage to this country than anybody. And we see Israeli flags in the Capitol along with the Confederate flag. What does that tell you about our, quote, strongest ally, Israel, in terms of what happened yesterday, Jamal?
Well, obviously that the whole Jonathan Pollard thing, and this is another thing that Trump pulled out of his pocket. This is how the things that he's been rewarding his allies and with pardoning and whatever. And one of them, by the way, Jonathan Pollard returned to Israel
as a hero
on a plane owned by Sheldon Adelson on his private jet. So people don't talk about that. And he was received by the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. So the message that has been sent, if you betray this country,
you're welcome here. You're welcome here.
You can be a hero.
Right.
This is the damage that Donald Trump has created. We've been talking about it for the past 4 years, from what happened in the Middle East, what's happening in Yemen, what's happening, covering up for Saudi Arabia with the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi, giving them a pass, and pardoning now his crooks, and now egging on, bringing back really from, I guess, the back rooms, the white supremacists, and putting them front and center of his administration and his supporters. I don't know how many years it's going to take this country to kind of recover from all the damage that he had created.
I don't know, Jamal, but I want to tell you what Benjamin Netanyahu said to Jonathan Pollard when he greeted him. And I think this is very telling. He's saying this to a U.S. citizen who committed treasonous acts against his own country, the United States. He said to Jonathan Pollard, "Welcome home." So traitors to the United States who commit, again, Jonathan Pollard is unmatched in the treason that he committed against the United States, spying for the state of Israel. He did more damage than any other spy. Welcomed home as a hero, and the Prime Minister of Israel, who's supposed to be our ally, says to him, "Welcome home." So traitors, U.S. traitors, are welcomed in Israel. I guess that says a lot about U.S. foreign policy, Jamal.
Well, hopefully this is gonna change, and then that's the big question. If we survive the next 13 days of Donald Trump, what are your expectations from a Biden-Harris administration?
Well, if this coup d'etat, and I do believe it was an attempted coup d'etat, did not take place, Jamal, we would be talking about today is the flipping of the Senate with Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff giving the Democrats control over the Senate, so that, this is really the big news, the big political news, is that now, for the first time since Barack Obama's first 2 years in office, you have the executive branch, the Senate, and the House all being controlled by the Democrats. This, I think, gives the Biden administration the opportunity for the first 2 years, because we know in presidencies, it's the first 2 years where you have the political capital to make the biggest changes. Barack Obama decided to go for the Affordable Care Act. What will Joe Biden do? Who knows? But the opportunity now for 2 years until the next midterm election is that they can make big changes across the board. Unfortunately, the first year has to be spent repairing or attempting to repair the damage associated with the Trump administration, who's done everything to undermine justice, international politics, domestic politics, the Equal Rights Amendment, the Environmental Protection Act. I mean, he has, basically supported everything having to do with lawlessness and corruption in the U.S. government. So it's going to take time for Biden and Harris to kind of get back on the footing, especially in the Department of State. Once that's done, the pandemic is still with us, Jamal. So I think that has to be a priority, to figure out a national strategy to deal with the pandemic, and financially to, instead of that $600, everybody's going to have to get the $2,000, and we're going to have to fund the states, because one of the things that got lost at all this is that the pandemic is getting worse. We have a mutated virus, which is going to cause even more problems than we have right now. We have vaccines sitting in refrigerators, Jamal, that are not getting into people's arms because we don't have a national strategy supporting the states to vaccinate as many people as possible. So I think that's got to be the number one priority for the Biden-Harris administration. We have to deal with the pandemic first and foremost. And then the second thing is, it's got to be the economy. We got to get the economy going again. We got to get people back to work. And then the third thing is got to be racial justice. It just has to be. I mean,
I'll add one more priority, and I think,
what is it?
Is to really put the entire Trump family
in jail,
behind bars. Really, yeah. I mean,
accountability.
They are responsible for what happened
yeah.
on Capitol Hill. They're responsible for the 4 deaths, by the way,
yeah,
including Trump Jr., who was earlier also egging on and cheering on the crowds. And aside from everything else, otherwise, if you give him a pass, he'll
We
just
can't.
sit in Florida, in Mar-a-Lago, being a thorn in your side, and building a base to come back at you in 4 years. I think this whole idea of this whole Trump kind of hijacking of the Republican Party, I think Donald Trump wants to create his own party. I mean, that's Phil actually said that on the show
Right.
earlier. Phil Pasquini is to take the fringe, not the fringe actually, take the far right elements in the party and just create his own party. And,
I think that's
come
right.
back in 4 years, or he has this whole and you have to get rid of this early on. And,
So here's the thing,
and
Jamal.
really go after him for all the crimes he and his family have committed.
No, I agree with you, and I think accountability. It looks like Merrick Garland is going to be our new Attorney General, who's a really solid choice by the Biden administration. And a lot of the legal problems that Donald Trump and his family are facing are going to be state charges from New York, possibly other states, which there's no pardon in the world that is going to get Donald Trump and his family free from those state charges. That has to go forward, absolutely. But let's keep in mind that it's not just Donald Trump that where accountability has to take place. We have to go to all of the senators, all of the Congress people who supported, enhanced, and facilitated this. And you're right. I mean, they're going to have to vote out Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, Marco Rubio, the whole lot of them. And that's part of the accountability. There's accountability from the justice system, but there's accountability from our voting system. I mean, and we have to ask.
This whole also electoral system must end. I mean, we
Yeah.
just can't keep going back and back again to this whole thing. What happened? We're talking about democracy, about one person, one vote. Let's go back to this.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then the final thing that I'll say, because I only know we only have a few more minutes left. Let me just ask the question generally: when will this country confront the ugly original sin that it was built on, called slavery, and ethnic cleansing of indigenous people? When is this country going to confront the reality that it was built on slavery, and that the Civil War and the secessionist movement, we've never gotten over that?
Well,
and
that's
that
the whole idea. These guys, they still want to have slavery.
No.
I mean,
So
they
my
just
question-
haven't, recovered from this.
But when are regular Americans going to believe what we've been saying for years, that this country has a white supremacy, domestic terrorism problem? I'm not worried about some guy in Afghanistan or Iraq or Syria. I'm worried about the thousands of people who had guns, who came to the Capitol and attempted to overthrow, the legislative branch of our government. That's what I'm worried about. And Jamal, our intelligence, I'm sorry to keep coming back to that, our intelligence services knew about it, and we let them through the door. So for what it's worth, we're coming to another close of Arab Talk. My frustration is because we've been talking about this for so many years. And, the chickens came home to roost. It's really sad.
That's right. You've been listening to Arab Talk on KPO San Francisco 89.5 FM. Go to our website, arabtalkradio.com, to download all of our podcasts. And we wish you a better year in 2021. And we'll talk to you next week.
Talk to you next week.